Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday here from Awesemo.com. We are ready to get into another college football slate. We got a good 12 gamer for you. I am Ben Raza. I am joined, as I always am, by Matt Gajeski. We are ready to break down the season, Matt. It's pretty moving along. We are deep into conference play already. Does it feel as fast to you as it does to me?
Yeah, I can't believe it's week 7. It does not seem like we've been doing it that long. It's kind of crazy how fast the season actually does move.
It really is. But you know what? Still some undefeated teams, plenty of drama to break down in the playoffs and whatnot. We know all that. We've got a real good DFS and betting slate to get to. So we're going to dive into the games. But before I do, of course, our friends at PrizePicks, talked about them last night. Going to talk about them again because they are sponsoring the show again today. And we appreciate them sticking with us. If you've not been over there and you're interested in daily prop-based contests, easy format, really exciting. And they want to give you a very nice deposit bonus to get started. Basically, when you go over there, you're picking 2, 3, 4, or 5 players on the board. You're going to project, are they going over or under their scores? If you say you do 5 for 5, you're going to get up to 10 extra entry fees. They're offering, of course, college football, NFL, NBA, which gets started Tuesday, esports, MLB, anything that you want, they've got. Download the app in the App Store or on Google Play and make your first deposit using the promo code Awesemo. You're going to get that instant first match deposit bonus of up to $100. They have so many props on the board today. The first one I know is going to get me in trouble, but I'm going to stick with my guy. I know it's Georgia. I know it's bad. And I know he's not a prolific passer, but I do think that Will Levis today will do more with the arm, probably because he's going to have to. It's a pretty pedestrian line, 139.5 passing yards. I do think he can eclipse that just by volume alone.
100% agree. It's one I talked about on like my little solo prize pick show. Georgia gave up over 200 yards to Bo Nix. Will Levis is a significantly better signal caller in a better offense. And you look at Georgia's level of competition this year, it's been really bad. They've already played South Carolina, Vanderbilt, UAB. They did mix in some really tough games there, but the more we see out of Clemson, the more that game just looks like a pedestrian number. So decent offenses should give Georgia trouble. They have a couple injuries in their secondary as well. Pure volume gets Levis there. I'm 100% with you.
What do you make of another guy who's just been fantastic all year, and he's going to be needed today for Texas? Bijan Robinson, we saw him do all he could against Oklahoma, ended up not being enough, but at the same time, his rushing prop is at 119.5 today. Do you think he's the catalyst for Texas, or do you think Oklahoma State can slow him down?
I think they'll try to. That's a little high for my liking. He projects just over 100 yards for me. So if I was taking it, it would be the under, but they're just absolutely going to ride him. And they have a good coach there in Sarkisian. He's going to be sensitive to whatever Oklahoma State's giving them. So that's not one I'm particularly in love with.
With so many on the board today, like, how do you go? Is there a category that you find yourself leaning towards more often, or do you take it at face value and say, you know what, whatever the inefficiency is where I'm going to go?
I go wherever the inefficiency is. A really silly one that I've been trying to get people to take is Max Johnson over 1.5 rushing yards. He averages 1.2 per carry, so it just doesn't make sense.
I worry about the sacks today. LSU's got nobody left. He might be playing 1 on 11, but we'll talk about that game in due time. Let's dive into it. We've got 12. We start with a game, Texas A&M. Credit to them. They pulled the upset of the season last week. Got it done against an Alabama team. That remains to be seen. I guess maybe we'll see them in Georgia in due time. But today, Texas A&M is a sizable favorite on the road here because they're playing a Missouri team that really can't stop anyone. It's up to 11.5. I took a bad number on this. I'm on the Missouri side. Over under is 59.5. But let's start with Texas A&M. I mean, how do you explain that? This offense at times looked awful against teams like Colorado. Now they look last week like a juggernaut. Do you expect that to continue? And where do you go today?
Yeah, I think they got very lucky in that game, like kick returns, some costly turnovers, but they still did move the ball. So we have to give credit there. They were significantly outgained by Alabama. So I don't think it's like Zach Calzada season or anything like that, but he did play better. And that has to be credited to him. He threw for 285 yards. I don't think there's a large body of him being a successful signal caller. So he's just a middling option, in my opinion. And a lot of people are going to try to target Missouri with the run game. So you'll see a lot of Spiller, a lot of Devin Achane, and I think both are fine options. They're going to be splitting this as like a 50-50 timeshare. And we like taking shots on some of these backs, but Spiller is going to be really popular today. And I think you'll even see a lot of Achane over on FanDuel. He's just extremely cheap over there. I think Achane's cash viable on FanDuel. Both of them should be somewhat owned. which is kind of like a difficult line to toe. How much do you want to play these guys in a timeshare? Really good matchup, but it's going to be somewhat mitigated because of ownership. So I'm just kind of middling on these two backs. There's a lot of really good runners on the slate. And I do kind of like pivoting towards the pass game here. And I don't think you need to stack up this A&M team or anything, but they have a lot of really cheap pass catchers with clear roles. And Smith and Jalen Weidermeyer are clearly the top two options. Missouri's been really bad through the air too. I think they've just been horrific on the ground, that some people miss that they're not a very good pass defense either. But at these prices, I don't know how many targets Smith and Weidermeyer really need to pay off their salaries. So I'm comfortable with really any of the skill position players, mainly as one-offs because I don't want to fully stack Calzada.
Missouri 120th in rushing yards allowed per attempt. That's very, very bad at 5.8. But as you just mentioned, they're 105th in passing yards allowed per attempt. This team cannot stop anybody. Then we saw, in their last game, they beat North Texas 48-35. North Texas last night looked quite bad. So I'm a little concerned about my Tigers position here, but let's go to them. What can they do? Is it just the Tyler Beatty show? Is there anything you can do in the passing game? A lot of receivers are getting volume. It's kind of a difficult team to break down.
Yeah, it's tough to stack Missouri, not because of their offense. I mean, they're very pass heavy. They're playing up tempo. It's just when you stack Basilek, one, he's not mobile, so he has to have 300-yard passing games to overcome any sacks he takes. And then they do not have a clear target distribution. Even Kiki Chisholm, his route rate dropped significantly last week. And Towski Dove jumped back up to 80%. You have Mookie Cooper. He's coming back from an injury still, so they've sort of eased him back into action. What does his role look like? And then you have the fact that just Tyler Beatty has the second most targets on the team. So there aren't even that many targets going to the receiver position. So really hard to stack Missouri to begin with. Beatty has an elite role. He's just expensive on this slate. And it's the same with Bijan Robinson when we talk about them. They're both elite backs, but there are cheaper backs that are seeing the same workload. And for Beatty, he's going into a tough matchup, and he's going to be playing as an underdog. He can always mitigate some of that with target volume, but at the same time, would you rather play like Beatty or Kenneth Walker at a much cheaper price? Or even on the other side, would you rather play Spiller at a much cheaper price or A-Chain? I think there's an argument to be made to fade Beatty just because of other options. But of course, he's tournament viable.
Yeah, 12-game slate, a lot of options. Like I said, I have a bad number on Missouri. I do think they have a chance to play okay, but I am worried about the defense holding up against pretty much anyone at this point. Remains to be seen, but let's move. We got 12 games. We got Florida and LSU. On paper, in theory, this should be a big game, but LSU has just crumbled. And that is why we've seen this spread. Matt, we do Betting You, our exclusive college football betting podcast, which is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. We do that on Wednesdays, and this spread moves significantly from then. Florida is up to 12. I see 12.5 in some spots, 59.5 point total. Let's talk about this team. They gave Alabama a run, but that was in the swamp. Now they're on the road here. How do you think they attack LSU, and who do you think benefits the most?
I think they try to attack them on the ground. LSU is not good in run defense. They're allowing 5.1 yards per attempt, a really bad mark. Florida, with their dual threat quarterbacks, they're just significantly more run heavy than they were last year, still playing with about a league average pace. But their two leading rushers are Anthony Richardson and Emory Jones. They're two signal callers. So I think with Florida, you're just either playing one of them, probably Jones. Like you can't play Richardson. He just doesn't play enough snaps. You're playing Emory Jones naked, or you're stacking him with one of the really cheap receivers like a Trent Whitmore or a Justin Shorter. And the only reason I'm okay with that is because Whitmore and Shorter are so cheap. But even Emory Jones, he just comes out as a middling play because he's splitting snaps with Richardson. So it's really hard to play anybody on Florida. Their backfield is a three-way committee. Just the way they're using their skill position players, even in a nice matchup like this, it's similar to Georgia, where it's really tough to decipher where the production's going to go.
On the other side, I mean, seemingly every day, it's another top end guy. Stingley goes down weeks ago. Ricks is gone. Booty is gone. Just a multitude of injuries on both sides of the ball. So what is left here? You mentioned Mac Johnson and his elite running ability with his 1.5 yard prop right now. He's obviously not going to do a ton on the ground. They don't run the ball at all. I mean, I've seen this team at times. They really can struggle, but without Boutte on the outside, who is it that steps up, and where do you look for LSU, who's probably playing from behind?
They kind of abandoned that approach and gave up last week. They actually gave Tyrion Davis-Price 22 carries. He's never really had a workload like that this year. So I don't know if that's something they're going to try to continue with or not. They weren't successful. So, I mean, I still think they're going to embrace the pass. They're passing 60% of the time. They do play up tempo. They just have not been able to sustain drives. So that's why their plays per game is a little below average. But without Butte, there's a lot of value to be had among the receivers. They also don't have Deion Smith today. So you're going to see Jack Beck at 5,500 as the clear top target. He's a dude that has seen a ton of targets recently, 19 targets in their last 2 games. Brian Thomas at 3,700. He has 11 combined targets in the last 2 games, and his route rate continues to rise. And now you have Butte completely out of the lineup. So I think you see Thomas near like a 90% target share. And you even have a guy in Malik Neighbors whose route rate is at 50% the last 2 games. He's somebody that probably works into a larger role as well. And he's just the stone min if you can't find anybody else to play.
Or you're not looking, obviously in tournaments, you can do pretty much anything, but like, I assume that Max Johnson and these guys is not a priority stack for you.
Not a priority stack. I don't have any Max Johnson today.
Did you bet this game?
Yeah, I took it at, I bet a lot of games. Let me find it. Florida -10.
Yeah, I have 10 as well. This is a game. It's not one of my favorites, but I do have exposure to the Gators, and it's just a product of LSU, not being any good, but also all their good players are just chilling at this point. So could be tough for them. It looks like kind of a lost season and then some. Another game, another SEC game. We've got Auburn, 4.5-point dogs going into Arkansas, 54-point total. This is probably like a reprieve for Arkansas. Every week that they play an absolutely brutal schedule. We've talked about that all year. Now they get Bo Nix coming in, who at times, credit where credit's due. He's made some plays here, and going against Georgia is never easy. What do you expect from him and Bigsby and the pass catchers against this Arkansas defense?
Yeah, I bet Arkansas -3.5. If you can find a better number, I'd take that for sure. On the Auburn side, I mean, they've also played some tough opponents recently. Bo Nix played a little better than I thought he would against Georgia, and he does have his mobility, so he can always fall back on that. Because he doesn't really offer a ton as a passer, he's going to be like a middling option. I think you can run him naked or you can stack him because his receivers are all really cheap. It's just really hard to differentiate between Demetrius Robertson, Kobe Hudson, and Shedrick Jackson. They basically all have the same target volume. So if I am playing a stack here, it's Kobe Hudson. I think you can, and I think you can maybe use like Hudson as a run back if you're using the Arkansas side of this. Tank Bigsby has allegedly been banged up this year, so you're seeing more work from like Jarquez Hunter, and Sean Shevers is still playing in like a pass catching role. So it's pretty difficult to target Auburn. I think just contrarian stacks with Nix are fine, but I'm not in love with that. Of course, I feel about Nix. He's 3 300-yard passing games in a 3-year career at Auburn.
Yeah, not really there. All right.
Their new offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo, you might remember him as the former Colorado State offensive coordinator. They throw the ball a ton and they play up tempo. So even if Bo Nix is bad, like volume's there.
Oh, no doubt. They're playing, they're almost 75 plays per game. They do pass at a good clip. It's just wildly inefficient. And we've seen Arkansas. I mean, it's a product of playing Ole Miss, but they were in a wild one last week. They've played some games. You've got KJ Jefferson. He's 7,500, 9,200 over on FanDuel. You've got Traylon Smith in the backfield, and you've got Traylon Burks on the outside. Where does Jefferson fall in your rankings today? And then who do you look to pair him with if you do go there?
Jefferson is a fairly solid price adjusted play on this slate. He's a guy that has great mobility, so you can certainly target him just based on that. And I actually think he's pretty easy to stack because you have Traylon Burks depressed right now in price after a couple of really tough matchups. And he has a 35% target share. So when they do have to throw a little bit here, and I mean, with Auburn on the other side running a ton of plays, I think you get a little more volume out of Arkansas today. Traylon Burks is an easy stacking option. Outside of that, it gets a little more difficult. Tyson Morris is the wide receiver too, but they don't really target their secondary targets very much. Trey Knox, they actually converted him to tight end, so he sort of reemerged, and he's the minimum price, but he turned an ankle last week, so you might see him limited. It's basically Burks or bust for stacks. In the backfield, we were on Traylon Smith seeing a decreased workload earlier this year, and then he popped up for a random 17-carry game. But Raheem Sanders has just flat out outplayed him. There's a lot of really good cheap running backs today on DraftKings, so I don't think you need to get to Raheem Sanders, but he's now touched the ball, 20 times recently to Burke or to Smith's 12 times. They're still going to split, but it's moving away from Traylon Smith, so you're certainly not playing him.
That's a little surprised. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Traylon Smith was someone going into the season I thought could be good. And Arkansas has been pretty good. I mean, again, that Texas win looks better and better each week. So
he's good. He's just a small back. Like he's 200 pounds. So it's hard for him to take a full workload. He's been banged up a lot. So I'm not surprised they're starting to use him in a committee. He just sees they need to keep him like fresh because he gets hurt so much.
Anything else from this game?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty clear where you want to go if you do attack it. And it's a decent one to attack. The total here is pretty good. So I would be considering it. There's a lot of bad totals on today's DraftKings slate, but this one is at 54 total. That's firmly in play. The highest is only 63.
One of the better totals is coming up, what we're about to get into now. You've got Oklahoma State. This line, they're taking some money. It's down to 3.5. Going to Texas, 60.5 point total, though. So a lot to like. Oklahoma State, it's really hard to get a read on them. They've had a lot of injuries, particularly on the outside with these receivers. We know they got Spencer Sanders. They've got Jalen Warren, massive workload in the backfield. But what do you make of this Cowboys offense? How did they attack today against Texas?
I think you can go either way against Texas. They've been middling against the run and the pass, but in particular, they're allowing 5.4 yards per attempt on the ground. You just saw Kennedy Brooks destroy them. The only thing that you're worried about is negative game script for Oklahoma State, but they do run a ton of plays as well. Jalen Warren has one of the most ridiculous workloads in all of college football right now. He's an easy cash game play on this slate at his price. And he's the reason I don't think you need to go up and play guys like Tyler Beatty or Bijan Robinson. He's just an absolute monster. He's averaging 25.2 touches per game with 32 touches in 3 straight games. Just unbelievable workload.
Anything else from them? You mentioned the workload, no doubt about that. Like I said, on the outside, it's just very hard to get, correct me if I'm wrong, I just haven't seen a ton of rhythm to this team, and injuries have played a part.
For sure. And they're 5-0. So they're not going to be pass heavy unless they have to. They're only throwing the ball 33.5% of the time. I do have Spencer Sanders stacks today. They're projected to trail in this game. And Sanders has fantastic mobility, really easy stacking options too. If you want to pay up, you have Davontavian Martin, Tay Martin, former Washington State receiver. In the middle price range, you have Brennan Presley. And if you're punting, you have Rashad Owens at 3,200. I think Rashad Owens is even viable for cash games because he's so cheap. But Sanders, really easy to stack. Clear run backs on the other side for Texas. I do have contrarian stacks with Spencer Sanders today.
Not cash viable, though.
Spencer? Sanders?
Yeah, Spencer Sanders.
Maybe an outside consideration, but I'm playing Jalen Warren in cash.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. What about, quickly, before we go to Texas, Jalen Warren's 10K over on FanDuel. Is he still firmly in play, or is that a little too much?
No, FanDuel, you can play him if you want. FanDuel is an absolute joke in pricing. So I think you're prioritizing Corral and Hendon Hooker as the very expensive guys, and probably Josh Downs. And from there, like Devin A-Chain is 6K, I think. Betch is like 5.6K. Like Jerome Ford is below 10K. Like the FanDuel is complete. I can't even believe their pricing today.
Yeah, I got some messages this morning from you talking about that exact thing. You were not
like
a fan.
Jaden Hazelwood is below 6K.
Yeah, it doesn't seem good.
Like my FanDuel lineup, I ran the optimum. I was like, how do you not play this lineup? It's unbelievable.
Soft pricing. What can we say?
I thought about it for 30 seconds.
Oh, that's why people come to watch the show, because you only need 30 seconds to find that. And that's why we're gonna get some FanDuel on the show. Don't worry, we got you guys covered. We're getting through the games as fast as we can. Hit that like button as well.
I spent like 1 minute on FanDuel today.
Well, you win some, you lose some. We're gonna find some time though. Talk to me about the other side of this game. You've got Casey Thompson, you've got Bijan Robinson. They got some injuries on the outside. That was a brutal game against Oklahoma in a lot of ways. But Texas, I like Texas. I know the spread is going the other way. I think Texas is going to play pretty well today. I don't think Oklahoma State is nearly as good as the undefeated record. That's for sure. What do you think about the Longhorns?
Yeah, I bet Texas at -5. Got a bad number there.
So did I.
Did not expect it to go this way. Oklahoma State hasn't played anybody good. But anyway, for DFS, Casey Thompson, I think, is a somewhat middling play in DFS. I have some stacks of him as well, just because of the really good game environment. And I think Bijan comes in with some ownership. He just is one of the most recognizable names in all of college football right now. But the fact is, Bijan Robinson's workload's not significantly different than Warren. Then it's worse than Warren's, actually, or Kenneth Walker. Some of these, even Spiller, I think, with his fantastic matchups, comparable in price adjusted value compared to Robinson. So if you have to salary, feel free, or you're stacking the game. Robinson's fine, but he's just really expensive. Thompson's not, and you can stack him in any which way you'd like. Worthy's now extremely expensive, and I think that makes sense with Jordan Whittington getting hurt. We have Joshua Moore as the mid-price receiver, and then the number one replacement is going to be Marcus Washington. he's extremely cheap if you're just punting off a receiver here. I do have some builds where it's like Spencer Sanders and then like Tay Martin, run it back with Marcus Washington, or conversely, Casey Thompson to Marcus Washington with Jalen Warren on the other side. So I have plenty of this game overall.
Last question on this game. Tim brought this up in chat. Do you think that Desmond Jackson being back could make it more of a timeshare in the backfield, or do you think that Warren's just consolidated at this point?
Yeah, I think so, but Jackson didn't really have a role when he was healthy earlier in the year.
Fair enough. UCF 21.5-point underdogs going to Cincy. These are like the close games that Cincinnati's going to have to watch out for as they march towards their undefeated season. This is just 3.5 touchdowns-esque, 56.5-point total. Listen, it's been a rough year for UCF. Obviously not the start they wanted. They lost some crazy games in there. They're not the same super fast-paced team that, of course, is transferred to Tennessee. But what does this UCF offense look like now? How do you think they try to get in a game against a very good Cincinnati team?
Well, their three best players are hurt. So
good start.
They don't have Gabriel, they don't have Bowser, and they don't have Robinson. So, and Mikey Keene has played horrifically in his first couple games, like couldn't even get it done against East Carolina. Ultimately, the team is implied for 17 points. So I think it comes down to, do you want to run one of them back against your whatever you're playing from Cincinnati? And they're cheap, so you could use O'Keefe, their number one receiver, is only 4,800. You could use Brandon Johnson at 3,800. He's clearly their number two. And I mean, their number one back now, Johnny Richardson, he has 12 and 19 touches in back-to-back weeks. He's only 3,900. I would rather play the Minnesota back, which we'll get to. But I mean, they do have really cheap volume, but I only think you're using it if you're running a lot of Cincinnati, which you should be.
Yeah, I mean, they only have an basically 18-point implied total. It could be a tough sledding type game, but it should be a positive game script. For the pass catchers, there are some elements that return there. But talk to me about the Cincinnati side. They've got past their toughest tests. They've got a great quarterback in Ritter. They've got Ford, everything that you could want. It's just a matter of, who do you think is the main guy that you want to target in this team today?
I think you want to play Ritter and you want to play Ford. They're going to be run heavy. Their plays per game, not great, but they're going to be really efficient. And I don't think it matters. UCF's defense hasn't been fantastic at points this year. Cincinnati is going to score a lot of points. They have the slate leading implied team total here. So comfortable playing Ritter and Ford. You can play them in the same lineup. You can play one or the other. Treat this however you'd like, but they're the two. One, like Ritter's the best quarterback price adjusted play, in my opinion. I think you could argue Howell and him are the top two, and Ford is the top three back price adjusted on the slate. So play them both, play one or the other. In the receiving game, Alec Pierce is just too expensive for his role. And then maybe you can play Michael Young, but they use a timeshare outside of Pierce.
Ritter's 10-7 over on FanDuel. What do you think about that?
Play Corral and Hendon Hooker.
There you go.
Or like the top three quarterbacks on FanDuel are very easy. It's Corral, it's Hendon Hooker, it's Sam Howell. And if you're not playing one of them, you're probably paying down for like Basilek or somebody.
Yeah, that's right. Missouri, don't sleep.
He's so cheap over there. You just don't need him.
His rushing yards prop on PrizePicks is -6.5. No joke. But that's neither here nor there. Cincinnati, 21.5-point favorite. I didn't bet this. I'm not going to bet this. Do you have any interest in laying that type of points? No would be the answer. I will say, for all these stats, all this usage, all the great resources that we have for college football that Matt compiles that we use to power this show, they're available on Awesemo.com. Get in, Awesemo.com/join. Even if it's just for a week and you want to sign up, you want to have some fun. We're betting some games, obviously, in there as well from the betting side of things. Just really, really good content on the college football side. I love doing this show. Love building this brand here. We're going to have plenty more as we move towards bowl season in due time. Michigan State, 4-point favorites. Going to Indiana, this team, say what you want, but they're still unblemished. They get it done. A lot of people thought that Rutgers could knock them off. They made enough plays, 48.5-point total. They've got the leading running back in the country. They've got alphas on the outside. Where do you break down the Spartans? Obviously, they've got some players.
Yeah, they want to be really run heavy. And I think that makes sense against Indiana here. Indiana doesn't have their starting quarterback, so you should see Michigan State playing with a lead. Kenneth Walker just has an absurd workload right now. It's right on par with like Bijan Robinson. So I think he's somebody that's a very clear play in sort of cash game builds, very comfortable getting to him. And then on the outside, if they are forced into pass-heavy game scripts, like Peyton Thorne's been very efficient this year. He's somewhat mobile. and they have a very clear target distribution between Jalen Naylor and Jaden Reed. Easy plays if you think the game is closer or they get down to Indiana for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this game that, it feels like Michigan State should get it done. And I'm not saying they won't. I do lean them in the game, but it's still a very competitive spread. There's no doubt about that. And so talk to me. Chat's already ablaze about former Utah great. I think that's probably a little much, but former Utah player Jack Tuttle. What do you see in terms of a drop off without Penix? How do you think this offense changes, or do you think it's not affected at all?
I think it is a big drop off. Tuttle's been really bad in his career. Like throughout, I'll go through his career stats: 57% completion percentage, 5.3 yards per attempt. The only thing propping Tuttle up is his price. I think in tournaments, he's an easy fade because he's going to be owned.
What do you make in terms of the skill position players? Do you think that Indiana tries to run against this team? Do they go to Freifogel? I mean, what is the move here if you want to target Indiana?
Yeah, they're still trying to pass. They have the 19th highest pass rate in the country. They're very up-tempo, 32nd in plays per game. So there's volume. It's just been incredibly inefficient this year. Freifogel is really cheap, but he still has a 31% target share, 10.2 targets per game. You can easily play Freifogel, and I think you can play Freifogel by himself if you're running just like Kenneth Walker on the other side. Hendershot's really cheap too. He's 4,300. Comfortable with him. He kind of needs a touchdown. He's more of a low upside option at tight end. And then with DJ Matthews hurt, Miles Marshall's had a lot of opportunity that he's done nothing with. He's not really a person I want to target, but Freifogel, Hendershot are fine. Stephen Carr's seen a lot of volume. I think it's basically because of attrition. Like David Ellis is gone. They lost some guys to transfer. So they're just really thin at running back. But it's the same inefficiency we saw with Stevie Scott last year. He has just 75 yards on the ground, 7 yards in the receiving game. Like on 22 touches per game, he should be averaging more than 82 yards. But that's just, it's not been there.
Are you worried about this line in terms of the betting market? It seems like Indiana's taking the money, and it seems like the public is on Michigan State a little bit.
I've already bet Michigan State.
So I have them in some things. It's not one of my heavier bets today. I still lean Spartans, but there is something about this game that's giving me a weird vibe.
Yeah, I'm completely fine with them.
Just to jump back for a second, Bowser dressed and warming up for UCF. Does that matter to you?
Yeah, he's going to be a lead back if he's out there. And if you're playing, what's the guy's name? Robinson, I believe, the backup. Yeah, Richardson. Sorry. Yeah, get Richardson out of your lineup right now.
Similar game, kind of feels equally trappy in some regard, except the line is moving, I'm pretty sure, in Nebraska's favor here. Nebraska's up to 4.5-point favorite. Going to Minnesota. This team can't catch a break. I think Nebraska's I was so disgusted with their effort against Illinois to start the year. And since then, I honestly have been really impressed. They played Oklahoma tough. They easily could have beat Michigan. These are competitive games. Now, some of them, one was in Norman, but the other one was at home. Now they hit the road to take on Minnesota, but they still have Adrian Martinez. They still have some things that I like. What do you look to with him, and how do you think Nebraska fares in this one?
I bet Nebraska. Minnesota I can't believe that the line's not a touchdown. I think it's because Nebraska hasn't ended up winning any of their super close games against Michigan State, Oklahoma. You can go on, but Minnesota has lost some horrific games. They cannot throw the ball. So if they play from behind, they're just like a lame duck out there. And they have significant issues against the run as well. I know they're only allowing 77 yards per game, but we've been trying to highlight who they've played. 2 MAC schools. They played Purdue, who's the pass heaviest team in the Big Ten West. When Ohio State ran, they had a ton of success. And then Ryan Day just, for whatever reason, abandoned it. It almost cost them the game. They didn't cover the spread, but Minnesota was a bottom 3 team in run defense last year. They have the same players. I don't expect them to be like top 5 in the country. They're probably somewhere in between those 2 numbers, but that's not reflected in the stats.
What else do you see from them? Like I said, Martinez is mobile, no doubt about it. He can do some things. Do you look to pair him? Do you look to run him naked, or do you just say this is a team that I think they're going to play pretty well, but there's no one guy that's worth targeting?
You can play him naked. I would rather do that because they spread it around a little bit.
On the other side, Minnesota, it's been a rough year for several reasons. One, they have an identity and they can't keep guys on the field. Ibrahim goes down, Potts goes down. So what is the situation in the backfield? I know Chad is trying to inform you about some of the running back updates. Where does it stand? What are the scenarios we need to think about when we talk about a Minnesota team who clearly wants to run the ball?
Yeah, they do. And So we kind of thought it was going to be Marquise Irving, and some news broke not long ago that he's working with the backups right now, and they're using Bryce Williams and Kai Thomas as sort of these co-starter, I guess. I don't really know how to put it, but I was kind of surprised when they named Marquise Irving the starter to begin with. If you remember way back in the day when Rodney Smith was with Minnesota, he got hurt. And then Bryce Williams actually came in and handled a significant workload in a couple games. He had a game with 25 carries. He finished with 85 or 87 yards. He had a game with 33 carries, finished with 141 yards. So he's a veteran on this team that they've used situationally in a workhorse role. I prefer Bryce Williams to Kai Thomas, but I think you're making the pivot right now. If you had Marquise Irving in your lineup, I did in a lot of them, and I'm making the pivot to Bryce Williams. If you want to play the other guy, Thomas, I think it's completely fine. People in the chat are saying it looks like Kai Thomas is starting. I'm not there. I don't know. Legit, I have no idea. Like, you're just throwing darts.
What do you care about anything in the passing game with Tanner Morgan, guys on the outside, or is it really just trying to decipher? Just look at the backfield, if anything.
Yeah, I'm not playing any Minnesota. You can't play Morgan. You can't play any of these guys.
God, that's an interesting game. I'm with you, by the way. I also bet Nebraska. We've been in good synergy this week, only differ on a couple games. So I'm with you. I do think Nebraska is just simply the better team. I keep it pretty simple there.
If you have the reports where you're seeing Kai Thomas starting, send them to me because I don't see that.
Look at this guy multitasking. I don't know how you do it. I can barely steer the show.
I'm seeing conflicting reports that Irving still might be getting work. Like, I don't know.
Let's keep it moving. This is the game I want to talk about, even though it's a massive spread. And if we get back, we'll have some time for questions at the end. I'll do the best we can. We did have a question about if you have them on the top of your head, cash FanDuel receivers. I know it's very soft. You mentioned Hazelwood before.
Josh Downs, Hazelwood, and I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's two.
Back, wherever you want.
Kentucky.
Matt Cheese really cheap. I mean, like, there's only like 5 options.
Yeah, but they're all very, very cheap. Soft pricing. Kentucky 21.5 point dogs. College game day is in Athens. They're just pulling out all the stops to try to stop down this Wildcats team. 44.5 point total. I love this team. We have bet them basically every week. They've been a cash cow. Will Levis is great. Rodriguez in the backfield is great. Wan'Dale Robinson is one of the most impact transfers in the country. I love the offensive coordinator that they brought in from the Rams, but they have not seen a defense like this just because there aren't that many defenses like this, if any. How big of a deal is this? Can we go to anybody on Kentucky today? They only have a 10.5 implied total.
If you play anyone, it's Wan'Dale, and it's only because he has a 40% target share, and that's still probably not a good idea with an 11 total. So really easy to sum up Kentucky, play Wan'Dale and move on.
Talk to me about the game a little bit. I mean, do you think that they can run against Georgia?
No, but I think they can throw a little bit. And Levis has been fine. When they do run, I think they might have success with Levis as a rusher too. He is mobile. I think they're just going to be able to move the ball a little bit against Georgia because of the way they play. You mentioned Cohn. He's a very sharp offensive coordinator, and he's been really sensitive to game script this year. With that said, they've been winning every single game they've played. So they're really slow right now. They're really pass heavy, but situationally, we've seen those change when Kentucky has been in close competitive games. They've embraced the pass and they've gone up tempo, similar to what you've seen like out of LA at times in the past. So I don't think they're going to be the same really slow team in this spot. If I were taking a position on the game, it would be the over. And I think the line right now is pretty ridiculous. Even like take Kentucky out of it. When you have a 3 touchdown favorite in Georgia and a game with a 44 point total overall, that's pretty ridiculous. Like, Kentucky going to score 10 points in this game? I find that pretty unlikely. And I think they'll be able to move the ball against Georgia in ways their opponents haven't. And I think there's honestly a pretty good argument that Kentucky's the best offense Georgia's faced this year.
I agree across the board. And a lot of people, and I get it, are comparing this to when Arkansas went in there and they were just absolutely overwhelmed. There are elements of that, but Kentucky is a different type of team there. They've played 5 of 6 games in Lexington. That's my biggest concern, to be honest, but I think they will be ready. I have this at 23.5. I know you jumped on it as well. Anything over 3 touchdowns, I'm okay with. I do think they will move the ball. My question to you is, Georgia care enough about the game to use their real quarterback? JT Daniels just chills out. What's the situation there? And is he even relevant if he plays?
Stetson Bennett has been surprisingly good.
He really has. I got to give him credit.
I did not think he had it in him, but he's been pretty good. And he's actually been a lot more mobile than Daniels. So I'm not 100% sure how much of a downgrade he is. And I think that's part of the reason why they're not rushing Daniels back. He's completing 69.5% of his passes for 12 yards per attempt with a completely makeshift receiving core. Like, did you see Ladd McConkey last week, like running all over the field? Like, I couldn't believe it.
I just don't really understand at times with JT Daniels, like, is he ever coming back or what? Because it seems like every week he's on the cusp of playing and then they don't play him.
Yeah, he has an oblique injury, I think. So it's like a core muscle.
Well, they better, they're probably not going to need him again. And I don't think it's really relevant, but I am surprised about that. What do you think about Georgia's backfield? They've got about 10 guys. It feels like running the ball. Do you think in a game that maybe stays a little more competitive than they're used to, it consolidates to someone like Zamir White, or is it just a team to stay away from?
I think it's a team to stay away from. They haven't consolidated in close games. Like Clemson was really close. They didn't consolidate. And their receivers, it's just a mess trying to predict who's going to be out there. I can basically tell you Brock Bowers is going to play a lot and he's expensive. And outside of that, I think Jermaine Burton, he didn't play last week, but he's supposed to be back. But other than that, no idea who sees the snaps.
It's going to be very, very interesting. I don't even mind. I don't really bet team totals a ton, but if you can find a team, like I do think that Kentucky's going to score more than one touchdown in this game, regardless of even if they get blown out. I respect the offense a lot. Do think they'll cause some different problems. Ultimately, Georgia's going to be too tough. I think we all know that. And Georgia's allowing only 2.2 yards per rush and 5.1 yards per pass. That's ridiculous. Almost best in the country in both. But I still think Kentucky with the points for me, over 44.5 for me.
Same.
Yeah. Yes, college game day is there. What are you going to do? Win some, you lose some. Anything else from this game? This is one of the worst ones on the slate.
I agree, for DFS specifically, and because Georgia uses that nasty, nasty committee.
Very true. This one, the complete opposite. I don't want to watch this game, but I sure as hell want to get there in DFS. You've got Miami 7.5 point underdogs going to Chapel Hill, 63-point total. Apparently, Florida State only can beat UNC. That's a story for another time. Doesn't really make sense. But both these teams kind of dysfunctional at times. You've got Van Dyke for Miami. What's left for this team? Another, they started with Bama. It was kind of a lost season from the start. How do you think they look today against a UNC team that at times looks really, really dysfunctional?
Van Dyke is much, much different. He's not mobile whatsoever. So he's a little bit tough to trust, I think, right out of the gate. And he played really poorly in their last game. So, I mean, you can play him because he's still a very unknown commodity, but just very difficult to trust. Their receiving room, I think, is a little difficult to trust as well, just with him being there. But Rambo's the guy you'd prefer to get. I think he's a significantly better player than Harley today. And then, I mean, like Keyshawn Smith is really cheap, but I don't have a lot of confidence in him. Same with Will Mallory. I think you can maybe get to them in run backs, but that's not the preferred side of the game, in my opinion.
Anything with the backfield?
I think probably not. Cameron Harrison, Jalen Knight, and splitting in a 50-50 committee.
On the other side, you've talked about Sam Howell a couple times already on the show. 9,200 on DraftKings, 10,800 on FanDuel. I assume you're saying you can justify that price tag, and he's one of the premier signal callers on the slate.
Yes. Sam Howell is the only thing that's working against him is price. And it's tough because if you want to stack Sam Howell, you basically have to use Downs because Downs has a near 40% target share, and they both are so cost prohibitive on this slate. So stacking them with anybody else like Antoine Green or Emery Simmons is really difficult.
Where does Ty Chandler fit in then in the backfield?
He's losing his job, man. He's
Tough
played
scene.
bad. We've seen
go back to Tennessee.
Both Tennessee transfers have now lost their jobs. Maybe Tennessee was onto something.
You'll do anything. Your whole sole purpose for these shows is to take a shot at Eric Gray. I know how you operate.
That's not true.
Yes, it is. You're a Kennedy Brooks fan, as am I.
I like Kennedy Brooks a lot, but I mean, it's not so much I dislike Eric Gray. It's more
that's true. That's fair.
Yeah, it's like, come on, dude.
So this is a good point that you made. When you're looking at Howell to Downs on FanDuel, that's 21,300 for two players.
You can do it on FanDuel easily.
So much that soft though.
FanDuel, yeah, do whatever you want on FanDuel.
So you got 17,900 over on
Dude,
DraftKings.
you can play Downs, Howell, your choice of hooker or corral and then some other like Jerome Ford, that still easily works out.
When you're talking about how though, are you thinking mostly skinny stacks with just downs, or do you want another pass catcher? Obviously, he's going to be much cheaper to kind of consolidate the production.
I prefer to just have downs.
Any feel on the game? It's not one that's on my radar at all.
I haven't bet it either. Both these teams have been ridiculously up and down this year.
No doubt. We did get a super chat from our friend Nick. The old 17 parlay, my friend. I will say, of all those games, I actually am on the same sides that you are. I'm sure some of them will lose, but I have no problem with any of the individual picks. I hope you hit that, because that means I'm going to have a good betting day.
17 parlay.
You didn't see
Good
this?
luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Dude, I cannot be in chat right now. I have lineups with Marquise Irving that I need to rebuild.
Tough scene for you. Well, we had the Kentucky, Michigan State, Nebraska, Pitt, Bama, Stanford parlay. I really have no problem with any of those teams. It's just, you know how it is. On
just
DK
listening, I like those.
Yeah, you're on there with me.
Yeah.
We'll throw a support. Couple questions while you're doing that. On DK, someone like Sam Howell got to be cash viable, no?
He's cash viable.
Yeah. And then any running backs for FanDuel cash that come to your mind?
Jerome Ford. A-Chain's really cheap. I think you can play him fine. Just fine.
Who?
A-Chain.
Okay. There you
Texas
go.
A&M.
BYU, Baylor. BYU's a 5-point underdog. Baylor 51.5-point total. Interesting game. BYU's been a tough team to break down. We've seen them in a lot of different situations. They don't really they kind of don't stand out in any way. They've got Hall, Algier, some playmakers. What do you make of this team? They've got a 22-point implied total going to Waco. How do you stack them up amongst the 24 teams that we have here?
BYU is not a priority. They're super run heavy this year, and they're just really difficult to trust with Jaron Hall under center. He's been really bad as a passer. The one redeeming quality he has is his ability to run. And if he does get there, I think it's strictly off that rushing ability. He's really hard to stack with like Romney and Pau. There's just better options in those price ranges. But ultimately, I am still okay with like getting one of them, maybe if you're running Baylor stacks, which I have a few. Bohannon projects actually pretty well for me, but it's not one I think you should be dedicating a lot of your portfolio to if you're running multiple lineups.
So you just mentioned Bohannon. It would, correct me if I'm wrong, I assume that Thornton would be the preferred guy. In with him, is it another guy? Estrada's he's 3,100 on DraftKings. Is it a guy like that, or are there other pass catchers that we should take note of?
Yeah, you named the two I'm particularly interested in. I would like to get Estrada if you need just a really cheap player. And then Thornton has a target share north of 30%. So he's just so involved that he's easy to get to as well.
So what is the latest? I know with Minnesota, they're obviously a key piece of news here. What is the latest on that backfield?
I have not looked recently.
Okay. So, but where are you at right now in your mind with them?
I think you fade it.
Okay. There you go.
I think you're going to see three guys now. Like Irving's a 4-star. Like they're not going to phase him out, but like earlier in the week, PJ Flex said that they were going to use multiple backs. So that's where I'm at. I am now not playing the 3K backs.
So yeah, we had a lot of questions about should we be off Irving, and I think that you kind of just explained that there's more uncertainty than maybe you're comfortable with in a lot of spots.
For sure, there's a lot.
Chandler for UNC, I think no, don't do that. Any other backs for UNC?
Caleb Hood's out still, it looks like. I probably would not play anyone. If you do, it's DJ Jones, but on FanDuel, you just don't need it.
Fair enough.
A-Chain is so cheap.
I mean, sometimes, even on a 12-game slate, when you've got these funnel prices, it really does open it up. And you kind of have to take that value where you get it. We've talked about both sides of this BYU Baylor game. Is there anything else to say? You mentioned that you have some run backs on both sides. Seems like a competitive spot. I don't think it's going to garner a ton of interest just based off other games kind of looking and seemingly being better.
I do agree with you. I like playing some Bohannon because he's really cheap, and we've seen them take their foot off the gas so many times this year just because they haven't needed to play with him. And he's been hyper efficient as a passer. If you just see that in a larger sample size, I think there's a chance that he's actually like a pretty good player. We just flat out don't know yet.
We did have a question about like top end backs. Would you rather pay for Kenneth Walker or Spiller?
Kenneth Walker. It's close.
Anything else from this game?
Probably not. I think we hit everybody. I'm not targeting the Baylor runners, if that's what you're getting at.
Okay, fair enough. Pittsburgh, 5-6 point dog going to Blacksburg, 56 point total. I've been a fan of this Pitt team. I don't really understand how they lost to Western Michigan, but regardless, they've got Pickett. They've got some guys on the outside, couple backs that garner some interest. Where do they stand? Where does Pickett fall? Addison is his kind of top pass catcher. And then can you decipher anything in the backfield, or is that still a 50-50 time split?
Pickett is a little bit expensive for me. He is somewhat mobile, but he doesn't use it a ton. And then he's harder to stack because they've actually been spreading it around a little more this year. Addison's fantastic, but he's just priced in a range where I would prefer getting down a little bit or just paying up for downs. And then Taysier Mack, it's kind of similar to him. His target share hasn't been similar to what we've seen in the past. And then they rotate their wide receiver 3. So it's just like a difficult situation overall to kind of get.
Well, that's a hot take. Pitt, best team in the ACC.
I don't think it's that far off.
I think Wake might be the best team in the ACC.
I think Wake's going to lose. Who did they take to overtime? Louisville?
Wake, I mean, they win every game by 3 points. They just beat Syracuse by 3 as well.
Syracuse, the juggernaut, hey man.
Don't Florida State's going to find their groove late in the year. Anything else for Pittsburgh? As I talked about, I do think they're a good team. They are in a competitive matchup here against Virginia Tech. Seems like a decent target overall.
I bet Pittsburgh.
I knew you would. You always bet Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I lost more money on that team than any other team last year, but they've been very good this year.
They have been good this year. They've covered in some good spots for us. On the other side of this game, and my apologies, Pittsburgh is a favorite here. I said dog. I was gonna say, man, that spread.
I missed it. I missed you saying that. So
yeah.
My bad, guys.
When I said it, I was just like, that's my fault. But no, Pittsburgh is a favorite on the road, as they should be. If not, run to back up the Brinks truck, go into Virginia Tech here. Let's talk about Virginia Tech. Of course, Hendon Hooker is not there. They've got Burmeister. Got a lot of guys receiving touches in the backfield. Trey Turner on the outside, Robinson. Where do we look for the Hokies?
I think they're like Trey Turner's an extremely easy play at his price. He's seeing more volume and he's been more efficient than Tavian Robinson. The question is, do you want to stack him because their quarterback is like primarily just a dual threat? I think you can pretty easily do that, and I'm fine with it. I do have some lineups like this just because it's a really good game environment overall. The problem is the Pitt side being expensive. So I'm comfortable with Trey Turner in particular. I'm not really trying to get a lot of Caleb Smith or Tavian Robinson. And Burmeister, I think you can run naked because he's a good dual threat.
You bet Pitt. Let's see. We've got implied. Yeah, they have a really healthy implied total. 31. That's pretty good. So this is
why I want to play him. But
yeah, that's a pretty sneaky game here, honestly. And we've seen Virginia Tech get into some of those. Certainly Pittsburgh can score. And at times they can give up a lot of points. We got a couple questions here. We got Trey Turner and Jack Tuttle, or Brian Thomas Jr. and Bohannon for Baylor for DK Cash.
I would prefer the Bohannon side.
The Bohannon side. And
but
yes,
I think the other side will be a higher owned.
It's because you don't like Tuttle.
Dude, okay, so talk me through Tuttle's upside. You don't have to make the case if you don't want to, but I'm just curious what you think it might be.
I mean, I think the biggest problem I have with Tuttle in general is something that you've brought up to me several times, is that Indiana can't really protect, and Michigan State's pass rush could really cause problems. I do think if you're talking about pure passing, that he may be able to really unlock Freifogel and Hendershot on the outside and keep them honest. I just don't know if he's going to be able to hold up in protection. I don't know what he's going to give you in the running game. It could be in the negatives, that possibly.
I have some of him.
Okay.
So not getting too crazy, but
I'm not staunchly, I'm not going to ride and die with Indiana today. I'm really not. Like I said, I like Michigan State in the game as does everybody else.
Why not?
Why not?
I like to ride and die with them.
Yes, you need to play 2 quarterbacks on FanDuel. You should definitely do that.
Whoever asked that, 100%.
Yeah, 100%. Love the show. We appreciate you guys. Thanks, Greg. Let's get to this last game. Then we'll circle back for some questions and anything else that you guys want in the time that we have. This is not a good game. Purdue's an 11.5 point dog
Oh,
What? Don't talk about making cases. Iowa is the luckiest team in the country. That's not up for debate. 43-point total. They're very good defensively. They make games ugly. What can Purdue do against them?
they're going to have to try to throw the ball a ton. O'Connell's like a carbon copy of Plummer, so I'm not really sure what to make of them. But David Bell is a really good target share. If you're playing anyone, it's him, or potentially King Doru, the running back. But I would rather not do that. I would rather just try to play David Bell and move on.
On the other side, Petrus is not usually our preferred target. I don't think that that's going to change today, but as someone like Tyler Goodson, who can, we've seen him rip off 25 carries in a game, is the volume enough to keep him relevant, or is it just there's too many other good running backs at the same price point?
There's too many other good running backs, in my opinion, but I think you can play him based on the fact that, he has the workload. So in tournaments, like, you can play guys like this, and I don't hate it. That's the best argument I'll make for him, is just the workload's there. So in tournaments, it's worth a look, but overall, not my favorite.
Yeah, listen, I don't think that I was ever going to be towards the top, just the way they play, and they do turn teams over at an unsustainable rate. I hope that they stay undefeated till they go to Nebraska, and then we'll see what happens. That's at the end of the year. They have a pretty easy schedule. I do think they're going to stay undefeated for quite a while. Freifogel's still okay for cash.
Yeah, he's right on the verge for me.
Yeah, they could throw the ball. Indiana's going to be all right. The Petrus 2 TD QB sneak game, that will live on forever. Quickly, well, if there's questions, go ahead and drop them. I do want to ask you, it's not on this slate, but just talk briefly about Mississippi and Tennessee. The over-under is 81 or 2. Obviously, you want to target that game.
Yeah, I think that's one of the clear targets overall. You can play both quarterbacks on FanDuel. No issues whatsoever there. I think you can stack. You can run them naked. If you're in cash, you probably don't play any stacking options, but like Ja'Cour Pearson's really cheap. There's just so many ways you can play the game. I'm really worried about like Jerry and Ely's status. So for tournaments specifically, he's a player to watch, because with him out, Henry Parrish saw such like an immense workload. And I think you can definitely play that in tournaments specifically.
When you look at, no, that makes perfect sense. It's just a game that I wanted to get in there because I know a lot of people looking at that. That's one to target for sure. All right. Any preference between Kenneth Walker and Ford?
I prefer Walker, but it's close.
Hendon Hooker or Sam Howell in FanDuel cash? Both would be my
slight preference to Hooker. He projects a little better, but you can play either.
Spawn or Spiller or Vaughn? Is that Deuce Vaughn maybe? Is Kansas State on the slate over there?
They are. Spiller.
We talked about at the beginning of the show when we talked about the Florida game, Davis Price for LSU. Do you think there's maybe they do a lot more on the ground going forward, or do you think they just fall behind and he's abandoned?
Say that again.
Davis Price for LSU.
He's not my favorite play.
The latest on Bowser we saw was that he was warming up, correct?
Yep. That's all I've seen. I believe that is the case.
DK, are there any cheapies sub 3,600 for the flex? I know there's some receivers that you've mentioned.
3,600?
Yeah.
Is that what the number was?
Yep.
36 is tough. I think you could go to Estrada probably is the number one for me. That one's tough too, though.
Best running back under 5K for tournaments on DraftKings.
Like Raheem Sanders maybe now.
Yeah, if Arkansas really is, that might be it.
I played him in one lineup.
So you're telling me there's a chance. Is Abacanada in play? I don't know. That's a pretty rough timeshare.
Yeah, it's at least 2, if not more. So it's not my favorite personally.
Joshua Moore or Wandell Robinson?
Are they the same price?
And Deuce Vaughn or Kennedy Brooks? That's
Kennedy Brooks, I guess.
Yeah. Favorite teaser parlay teams?
I don't have enough time to answer that.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Obviously it depends on what numbers you're looking for. Couple rules: try not to cross 0. Don't do it on totals. Those are good starting points. My personal teasers today, teams that are in there, is Florida. Oklahoma is in my teasers. Oregon was in it last night. That doesn't really help you. I think you could go up with Missouri, but that's probably a real dangerous game. That's probably where I'd start, though. I think Florida and Oklahoma both win relatively easily today. Tillman and Howell, or Mechie and Thompson?
Who was the first one?
Tillman and Howell, or Mechie and Thompson?
Who's Tillman?
I don't know.
Say his first name.
You did.
Yeah, say first names. Otherwise, I can't help you right now. There's a lot going on.
There really is. 2 questions. We've got Brian Thomas for a value punt.
Yeah, love him. I think he's viable in cash.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. This is an interesting slate. The more you look at the salaries, there are a lot of ways to go. I know you mentioned FanDuel's pricing is very soft and it funnels you to certain positions, but on DraftKings, there's a lot of different routes that I think you can take. Peyton Thorne and small field GPPs.
Yes, I think you don't need to get crazy with him, but you can play him for sure.
Teasers in college football are dangerous. That is a fact. Thoughts on Goodson on DK? I think we both acknowledge he's got some volume, but there's probably better running backs at that price point.
100%.
You mentioned on betting your favorite bets. You like Michigan State, you like Nebraska, Kentucky. Any others you want to throw out there?
Those are the favorites. I just got my CSV in. So favorite bets. Sorry.
Take a breath. You've done it.
2 minutes to go. It was ridiculous. There's a lot of lineups to switch. Texas Tech against Kansas. I think that's a pretty good one overall. They should roll through Kansas. I like Nevada over Hawaii and some off the board ones. But overall, I think the ones you named are my favorite.
If you're going to go off
Ole Miss right now against Tennessee, that's come down to 1.
I know. Tennessee's taking the money for sure.
I'm taking Ole Miss.
If you want to get into our premium Slack and have some fun and talk some games all day, 25% off your first month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You can use the promo code CFB Live before lock. It's going to cover you for college football, but all the other sports we have, the projections, the tools, the ownership, everything that Alex and the team here have built. You get all Matt's data, of course, as well. Really good time to do it. It's going to be a great month. You got all sorts of things starting up with hoops and whatnot. I got to give a quick shout out to Wyoming. This is one of my favorite bets today. They're in Laramie. You got Fresno State coming in. Wyoming's pass defense is going to cause them problems. I think Wyoming wins outright. They're a 3.5-point dog. Anything else here? We've got, what do we got? 14 seconds, Matt. I think we've done it, honestly. Last question, we'll go with Blackshear for Virginia Tech. Is there any reason to go to him?
Not really. He's in a bad price point. 3-away timeshare.
Bad. 12 up, 12 down. We did the best we could. A lot of questions today. We did our best to answer them. Thanks to Matt for getting through so many of them. And thanks to you guys for hopping in. Don't go anywhere, though. NFL tournament strategy is coming up next. We've got Greg. We've got Neil. Both of them doing fantastic work. Hit the like button on your way out. Let's cash some tickets today. Let's cash some winning lineups. Good luck, my friends. Talk to you guys same time, same place.